we wondered whether there might be some parallels that we might benefit from finding out about. So without further ado, I would just pass you over to Ruth. I'll just take a seat over.
Thanks very much, Pip. Good morning, everyone. I should like to say that I'm one of the beneficiaries of all the hard work that's going on in art. I've gone through the Learning the Ropes, the syllabus, and I've taken a great interest in art, everything that I can find about it. So it's a great pleasure to be here this morning, and I hope I can just pass on some of the things that have just been going on in my head when I look at cycling and when I look at ringing, and what it makes me think, really. That's all it is. I'll start off with a very quick whistle-stop tour through a few things about me, just because I'm brand new. I'm sure very few people in the room have ever heard of me or heard of the first thing about me. So I'll just very quickly whip through a few sort of key points, a sort of whistle-stop tour of my life, if you like. The first thing is that I came from a very musical family, and I think this made a huge difference when I was when I started learning to ring. Just surrounded by music for the whole of my childhood. That's my family at Christmas. That's the sort of thing we do, sit down and play the piano. When I was growing up, I moved on from the music that I'd done through my childhood, and I went and did physics at university. I hadn't had enough after my first degree, so I went on and carried on and did a PhD. That was at Nottingham University in experimental semiconductor physics. I wish that was me looking young 5 years ago, but unfortunately it's actually more like 25 years ago. What's a pity. I moved on from a PhD to actually teaching. So I spent 3 years teaching in 2 different schools, teaching physics up to A level. It was a bit like that sometimes. Yes, this will be useful to you later in life. And there were some wonderful moments when you have the whole classroom eating out of your hand, looking at you, waiting for the next bit that you're going to teach them because they're so eager. It was fantastic, but unfortunately that was very rare. And it was jolly hard work. The next thing was I went into industry and I spent 10 years, I actually worked for Cadbury's for 3 years, and I actually was the production planner for cream eggs. So I was responsible for every single cream egg that was manufactured, and there's a lot of cream eggs that are manufactured. In fact, I think they make something like 6 cream eggs for every single person in the British Isles. And I don't eat them, so I don't know who's eating them. I went on to work for Marconi, telecommunications company. I was in supply chain management there, managing teams of maybe 30 people. But this slide just sums it up. It was a constant stream of change and reorganisation. So it wasn't the greatest time, but what I was doing through all of that teaching in industry and working in industry, I was doing a lot of cycling. It was my hobby, my main hobby. Started off really sort of quite relaxed and casual about it, touring, just with friends. Gradually got more and more into it over the years, and over about a 20-year period, I started competing, started racing, started taking it really quite seriously. That's a photo of me in one of my races with added go faster blur. I don't know whether I was really going as fast as it looks. But, so I competed at quite a high level. I put a lot of time and energy into it. It was an all-consuming passion to be the very best I could be at cycling. And when I got the chance to escape from industry, took voluntary redundancy, what seemed the obvious thing to do was to move into coaching for cycling. People started asking me for advice. I was keen to give it. I saw this teaching background, liking helping people. I got into coaching. Now, that's my friendly, motivational, welcoming, empathetic coaching smile for you. What I don't actually do, which might seem a little bit odd, is actually see much of the people that I coach. Because these days, an awful lot is done remotely. An awful lot is done with power meters. People have a device on their bike which measures exactly what they're doing. They send me the data, and I look at it, and I can say whether they're training hard enough or not. Sorry, you've got to pedal harder. We're not trying. So a lot of it's done remotely with data and graphs. But the other thing, and this is very relevant to here and art, is I also work for British Cycling, running the courses for the new coaches. So in fact, I'm running courses for British Cycling, which are very like the modules which art runs for the ITS scheme. And that's a very, very comparable analogy. Ringing, I started in September 2012, which is no time ago. I know because a lot of people here would have been ringing for many, many years. I got into it because my brother and sister-in-law are very keen ringers. They met through ringing, and they've said for years, Ruth, you should ring sometime. Eventually, cycling took a back seat a bit more, and I was able to start. So I ring at Leigh Wotton, which is a tiny little village in Warwickshire, on an anti-clockwise 5. I've had a huge amount of help from Graham Nabb and the folks, some of the others here are the helpers there, the Harry Windsor Ringing Centre in Kyneton. I couldn't have made the progress I have without them. Fantastic. And I've progressed through the learning the ropes. Okay, so that's me, an overview of what I'm actually going to talk about with cycling. I'm going to start off by very quickly just going through what's going on in terms of participation in cycling, in the trends for that, and the same for ringing, or some indication of what's going on in ringing. Then I should go through what's been going on in the cycling world. I'll finish off by saying what might the world of ringing learn from that, or what's of interest to the ringing world from that. Okay, so cycling. Have you noticed any more cyclists about on the roads these days? Yes. Yeah, I think wherever you are in the country, it's pretty obvious there are more cyclists about. I think if you live in London, it's absolutely phenomenal how many cyclists are about, and it's not always a good thing actually with red light jumping and that kind of thing. But I've got a graph here of the membership of British cycling. Now, this is not the whole story by any means. Not all cyclists are members of British Cycling, absolutely no way. But it's an indication of what has happened in terms of growth in participation in cycling. So, it goes back to 1980 there at the bottom. For a good 25 years or more, it was bumbling along at about 16,000, 17,000 members. In the last few years, it has shot up. Over 80,000 people are now members of British Cycling. I say it's not the whole story at all, but it's an indication of what's going on in the cycling world. Okay, let's just compare that with ringing. And I'm sure that some of you will have seen this data before. The age distribution of ringing. The pale blue bars are 1988. The darker blue bars are 2009. So far left, it's under 20-year-olds have gone from being 20% in 1988 to 10% in 2009. So a halving of the numbers under 20, and the number who are 60 and over has gone from 13% of ringers to 40%. A massive shift of getting older of ringers. Okay. I found some data actually in a very recent ringing world as well. It was actually in a table rather than a graph, but I shoved it into a graph to show, it sort of shows rather clearly what's going on. This is the average age of peel rings. It was Andrew Craddock's article on February the 14th. You see there that back in the mid-1960s, the average age of a peel ringer was roughly 32 or so. Now it's about 55. And if you projected that onwards, give it another 10 years, and the average age of peel ringers will be over 60. There's a massive shift getting older for those who are peel ringers. I know not all ringers are peel ringers. There are thousands of ringers who are not peel ringers, but this is an indication, isn't it? And another way of looking at that, again in the same article, he had some figures about the number of peel ringers back in 1977. That was the Silver Jubilee year you remember. So perhaps a lot of ringing going on then. Just over 5,000 Peel ringers. And he was comparing it to 2012 because, of course, we had the Olympics and the diamond Jubilee. So maybe those two are comparable years in terms of opportunities or enthusiasm for ringing peals. And it was down to 3,000. Okay, so you get some of the picture of the sort of difference, if you like, in growth. So what's happened in cycling? I better start by just saying or explaining what the world of cycling was like about 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, when I started. And the world of cycling then was all about being in a cycling club. Of course, you could ride a bike if you wanted to ride a bike. You could go off touring and do your own thing as an individual. But if you were keen to meet other cyclists, keen to get into cycling and do more, find out what opportunities there were for you to be involved with others, the answer was join a cycling club. Okay, clubs were well established often they were formed around the time of the wars, between the wars, just after the Second World War. And club life is essentially, it's all about, it's not everybody races by any means, but it's mainly about racing. Clubs exist to promote races. If you don't have to race at all, but if you race, you do your own club's races, and then you might go to other clubs. So the community of clubs organise a programme of races, and your club organises some races, other clubs organise other races, you go along to other clubs, and it's a cooperation between clubs. The whole structure of the clubs is how it all worked and how it functioned. So a lot of racing was going on. Not all racing though. You can be in a club without racing by all means. Club runs, I don't know whether you can actually tell the difference there, but those chaps down there are supposed to be taking it easy. And then there's a touring cyclist there. Clubs might go off and do tours into lovely countryside as well. And there'd be a lot of social life going on in a club. I think the point really is club life was a sort of all-encompassing thing. It was you joined a club, that was your hobby. You spent a lot of time doing it. You had all your friends and social life there. You did your social rides, you did your training rides, you went and raced if you fancied it. And that's what being in a club was like. There wasn't really anything else. There wasn't really, any other way of getting stuck into cycling and enjoying your cycling. And if you said, I'd like to do more cycling, you could say to a club, can I come and ride with you? And they say, of course you can, we'd love to see you. Come along Sunday morning, 9 o'clock, we'll do about 70 miles, okay? Back by lunchtime. Yeah, you see the problem? And it is really hard to convince club cyclists that that is asking a lot of newcomers. It's really hard to say, because they just say, well, that's what we do. You can do it too. Come on. Come along with us. We'll wait for you. We'll wait for you for a few weeks. Then we might get a bit bored of waiting. But that's what club life was like. Now let me explain to you, I'm going to whip very quickly through this, but what British cycling has done and where the driver for what British cycling has done has come from. Okay, it's come from something called the UK coaching framework. Now, as I say, there's lots of names on here. I won't dwell on them. You've got the government department for culture, media and sport. Within that, you've got quangos for sport. And the quangos, or the executive non-departmental public bodies, I should say, for creating a sporting habit for life. So these bodies are for participation and involvement of everybody. If we're talking about Olympic performance and medals, you'd be talking about a different sporting body, okay, UK sport. But these are the bodies for participation, involvement, healthy lifestyle, everybody involved in sport. So Sport England, Sport Wales, Sport Scotland, Sport Northern Ireland. And a partner of those quangos is Sports Coach UK. So this is another non-governmental, non-departmental public body, or quango. But its job is to oversee and drive best practice in coaching for sport. So their mantra is excellent coaching every time for everyone. Okay? And what they do is they work with about 50 different sports governing bodies. So if you're in the Lawn Tennis Association, or the Football Association, or UK Athletics, your coaching programme and strategy will be assisted and governed and helped along by Sports Coach UK. And Sports Coach UK have got this thing called the UK Coaching Framework. And the aim of that framework is to provide a cohesive, ethical, inclusive and valued coaching system. And so they're aiming to do that with all sports governing bodies. Okay? Now, one of the first things they ask all governing bodies to do, or they advise all governing bodies to do, is to develop a participant development model. So what they say to these governing bodies is, you go away and work out what your participant development model is. And what they say is, think about, in your sport, participation. Who is involved in the sport really just because they're participating in it? They're just enjoying it as a leisure pursuit, a recreational pursuit. What about those who are developing their performance in that sport? Progressing, trying to become better at it. What about those who are involved in high performance in your sport? Who are they? How do they get into the sport? What ages are they? What's motivating them? What opportunities are for them? Who's coaching them? The Sports Coach UK encourages them to look at the pathways into and through the sport. So back to who's coming into the sport, what age are they, when do they come into the sport, why do they come into the sport, why do they stay in the sport, do they stay in the sport? All those sorts of questions. And also, it says, look at your participant capabilities. What do your participants in your sport need? Physically, what coordination, strength, agility do they need? What mental aptitudes do they need? What technical skills, what tactical skills? And it's only when a sports governing body has done all that, according to Sports Coach UK, that the governing body is in a fit state to start talking about its coaching workforce. Who it needs to be coaching, you know, how many coaches it needs, what levels do they need to be coaching, how they develop the sport. Okay? So British Cycling did all this and decided that what it had was a problem, because what it had was all these clubs, and below all these clubs there was nothing. The way into the sport was incredibly tough. And what it did was created a brand new board place for British Cycling, a new directorate within British Cycling, called Recreational Partnerships. This was in the annual report of 2009. What it said was, this is a new directorate established to deliver major growth within the cycling participation base. The department will aim to bridge the gap between new/recreational cyclists and local clubs. These quite difficult to get into clubs. The challenge is to design programmes that are more inclusive. Okay, so what did it do? British Cycling, once it had got this directorate in place, it started thinking about, not about racing. Racing will look after itself for the minute. Let's worry about who's coming into the sport, what opportunities there are for them, and what kind of experience they have. And one of the things it started to encourage, I must admit, British Cycling can't take the whole credit for this, because they did exist before British Cycling got on the bandwagon. But British Cycling jumped on that bandwagon and started really marketing their Sportys. A Sportif is a cycling challenge ride, which you just pay your money, you turn up and you do. There's no more commitment, there's no joining a club or long-term commitment required. But they're different distances. They could be 20 miles, could be 40 miles, could be 100 miles. You choose a distance that you think you can manage, and then you pay quite a lot of money, funnily enough, and this is very strange for cyclists. Cyclists don't like spending money. But these new cyclists who are coming into the sport, they'll pay 40, 50 quid for a day's cycling. And the experienced cyclists are scratching their heads going, we ride on those roads all the time. These new cyclists are seeing this event that they can come and do, where there will be backup vans, there will be feed stations, there will be marshals on the corners waving them through, telling them they're going the right way, helping them, supporting them, and basically saying, you can come and do this. And when you've finished, we'll publish the results on the website, we'll give you a medal, and you can have a certificate. And even if, this is an experienced cyclist speaking, even if you've only ridden 20 miles, really quite slowly, you've done really well. We give you a certificate, and you can feel good about it. And people do feel good about it. People feel so encouraged. They are so enthusiastic about Sportys. They love them. They book on to do them most weekends. This one, the picture there, is in London. This was Ride London, which happened the first time last year. I think they had 80,000 participants. Huge numbers. Some of the popular ones sell out in 24 hours. So Sportys is one of them. Another one is what I call fun rides, Sky rides. This is where Sky, the multinational media company, has sponsored it, work with British cycling, so that's why they're called Sky rides. But it's a programme of getting people on their bikes. And what they've managed to do is actually close some city centres and have routes through city centres that are about 5 miles. And they open it up, and young people, children, families, anybody got a bike, come and do it. They've had over 100,000 people doing those in 1 year, Sky rides. The next one is Breeze Rides, and this is British Cycling's promotion for women. Getting women cycling. Women are the hardest half of the population to get onto bikes. But British Cycling, what they did was they said, the way to get women onto bikes is to get women to encourage women onto bikes. Because women are not going to be confident enough to go and ride with the men. So what they did is they started training Breeze champions. This is women, any women, not skilled cycling women, just women who like riding a bike. Train them up. They now have 1,000 of these Breeze champions. And what they do is they get their friends out. They say, come on, let's go and do an 8-mile ride. We'll all go together and we'll enjoy it. This was actually a new club which I discovered recently. They are so keen. So keen. But the strange thing from an experience, and I keep saying this from an experienced cyclist point of view, I am staggered at the things they want and need to support them to get going with their cycling. Right? I saw on the Facebook the other day that one of their sessions is going to be how to clean a bike. Now, to me, don't you just pick that up? Surely you learn that. No, they want someone to show them how to do it. Why shouldn't they have someone to show them how to clean their bikes? That's what they want. They're beginners. They're getting into this. They're dead keen. And that's the sort of thing that they're looking for. Okay? There's something, one example which perhaps might show quite clearly what the difference is. Cycling magazines in the old days, like 10 years ago, would have been full of race previews, race results, race reports, profiles of elite riders, technical equipment reviews, racing heritage articles. The magazines now, I don't know whether it's chicken and egg, whether the change in the magazines has brought the increased enthusiasm, or the change in the market, the average reader has produced the change in the magazine. But what they talk about now is, what should you wear? How can you mend a puncture? Getting your bike that fits correctly. Bike maintenance courses, completing your first sportive event. You see the shift is immense in who all the marketing, all the information is going to. So, what can we learn from this in ringing? Well, I was trying to think of a way of describing what's happened in cycling so that I could just sort of, explain it in ringing terms as well. What I came up with was this. This is what used to exist in cycling. I'll call it a ladder, and I've just stuck on there sort of, you know, perhaps the bottom level of the ladder was you get onto your club social rides. That's your 60, 70 miles on a Sunday morning. Club training rides, local racing and elite racing, you know, you might progress onto racing. Don't have to race, no obligation at all to race, but that's what existed in the club cycling world. Okay, so I know this is going to raise a few eyebrows and maybe a few laughs, but I've just had the quickest go at putting some ringing rungs on the ladder. Okay, now I know the top of the ladder is not surprise major. I know that there's an awful lot beyond ringing surprise major, but it was just, you know, just a go that possibly you're a fully fledged ringer when you can play and hunt. Maybe you're ready to fly the nest and go off to learn your methods once you can play and hunt. Progress on to simple methods, then perhaps surprise minor, then perhaps surprise major. Of course, there's all the conducting you could be doing as well, and then there's more bells, of course. So there's plenty above that, isn't there? So what has happened in cycling? Well, in cycling there has been a radical, massive change where the ladder, if you like, has been extended downwards. There are now Sportys, new breed clubs, fun rides, and the growth is all coming, initially it's coming from, starting in, around the Sportys, new breed clubs and the fun rides. That's where all the enthusiasm and initial input for that growth in British cycling is coming from. People do progress on upwards. The Sportif rides in particular, once they've done a few Sportifs and they've trained up for those and they've got quite fit and they've done 100 miles and they've done it in less than 6 hours, they're going, what's next? And they go, okay, club, let's go and join a club. Get into a club, begin to get into racing. Okay, so it's starting at the bottom and it's progressing up towards the clubs. So what would there be in ringing? I know call changes already exist, obviously, and I know rounds already exist, obviously. But is there a possibility that there could be a whole lot of enthusiasm and excitement about ringing from people who are actually really doing very simple things in ringing? That's my question. And you know, it really comes from the fact that in cycling, the experienced cyclists had no idea there was this potential in cycling. A sort of summary here. Cycling before was about traditional club racing activities, club and racing activities. It wasn't easy for novices. There was very little or no growth in cycling at that time. Cycling now, there's been a huge shift to a much more participation approach. Far, far more accessible opportunities. If you fancy doing a ride and you can manage 15 or 20 miles, you could probably find an event you could go and get involved in. Sign up, go and do it. Get involved. It's led to huge growth in participation. Now, this is a really important point. It's also led to growth in traditional club riding and racing. This graph I showed you earlier on, growth in membership of British cycling. If I plot on there what's happened to the racing members, that's the club, the top of the club of the ladder, if you like. That's what's happened. That's the number with a racing licence in British cycling. You have to have a licence to race. The growth is huge in that as well. Over 45,000 people now with racing licences. So starting from focusing on participation, getting huge enthusiasm going at the lower levels, we've ended up with an increase in racing. A few things just to reflect upon. These are just the sort of things I was, just wanted to suggest. Club cycling and racing are flourishing. Ultimately, I think method rigging would flourish with much greater overall participation. Experienced cyclists did not, and they still do not, and I'm guilty of this myself, absolutely, do not understand how hard it is or was to get into the sport. Question, do skilled ringers understand how hard it is to get into ringing? Do they understand how hard methods seem to beginners? Thousands of potential cyclists did not start cycling while it appeared to be inaccessible and hard. They were all there, their potential was there for those decades while they weren't involved in cycling. But a huge shift in perception and opportunity and the climate for it has led to all those people giving it a go. Lastly, just as another sort of thought question, if all new cyclists were expected to progress to become racing cyclists, would that discourage them? Yeah, it is absolutely absurd to think of the ladies who can manage their 15 or 20 miles to suggest to them, keep at it, a few more years, maybe you could race. I don't want to race, what are you talking about? I'm enjoying what I'm doing at the level I'm doing it. Yeah? No, absolutely no expectation to move beyond what they're doing. Last point now, beginners need to build confidence gradually. I think there's a huge thing here, it's get out there and have a go at cycling. Enjoy it at a very low introductory level with no further expectation. Once you're doing that and you're enjoying it, you can go further if you wish. If you don't wish, don't worry. So there is vast diversity in ability in cycling, in interest in it, in the commitment and in the standard of performance of cycling. If you were to take the racing cyclists going out on their training ride and these beginner cyclists who are just getting together with their friends to go for a gentle ride, there are worlds apart, but there's space for both of them. Both are valid, and both are getting enjoyment, pleasure, and health benefits from their sport. This is a rather important point. People at different levels of performance do not have to always pursue their hobby together. Back to my fast racing cyclists and the beginners. There is absolutely no way that those beginner cyclists would be wise to go for a ride with the racing cyclists. It would be absurd. The racing cyclists enjoy what they're doing. The beginners getting started on it riders are enjoying what they're doing. They don't have to mix. And I think this is a really important point, because I think in ringing there are towers, there are areas where there are some very, very good ringers, and their pleasure, their enjoyment, their love of their ringing is about methods, peels, quarter peels, enjoying their ringing at that level. And there's a danger with this sort of message is that they think I'm saying, you've got to have beginners in your tower, you've got to ring rounds and quarter changes every week. You've got to have ringers, beginners, you've got to have them amongst you. No, actually, there's room for people who are doing ringing at a top flight level. And I'd say, any method I would say is actually, a high standard. And there's room for the people who are doing it at a lower level too. Some people do not want to and cannot put a lot of time and effort in. And also people change. There are people who put a lot of time in for a while, move away, come back to it later, and vice versa. I think there's a really important point here about the 21st century and what people are like today. In cycling, I have people come to me who are Sportys riders, and I say to them, are you in a club? They go, no, don't want to be in a club. Oh, why not? Well, it doesn't really fit with the time I've got, and I just like doing it, when I want to do it. I don't want to be constrained by what the club are doing. And I think it's a very real shift in people's lifestyles and habits. People are much, much more interested in doing things in bite-sized chunks, short-term goals, limited goals. People don't tend to take up cycling thinking, I'm going to do this for the next 5 years. They tend to take it up going, there's a ride in a few months' time. I'll train up for it, I'll go and do that. And that's an end goal that they can see as far as, and they can go and do it. But if you said to them, if you start this, it's going to take you 5 years, or 3 years, before you get to a half-decent standard, is that going to put people off starting? Lastly, if there was no expectation of going further than rounds and simple exercises, question, would it be easier to recruit and retain ringers? I've got a very good friend who's very, very clued up, mathematically and whatnot, and I can explain to him what methods are, and he takes it all in, no problem. Not a ringer. I've had a discussion, would you like to take up ringing? No, I can see how it works, but it'd take a lot of work, wouldn't it? So, that's the perception. Okay, what are my suggestions then? This is all my thoughts. Well, I feel that if there were some very simple exercises that were far more widely run, I think it would encourage those who are not able to ring methods to feel that they had more confidence to go to other towers, to mix with other ringers more. I think there are a lot of ringers who are happy to do their simple things in their own tower. I think there's a huge lack of confidence about going outside their own tower because they don't feel that they've got the ability and the skill and the experience to do it. But maybe if there were simple exercises that they'd learned, maybe simple dodging or kaleidoscope ringing or Mexican wave, and they knew if they went to that tower, they'd be doing it there, maybe that would encourage them. Secondly, greater pride in accurate striking of simple exercises. I do wonder whether people feel that need to get to ring methods, so they tend to maybe not enjoy the simplicity, take pride in doing the very simple things well. Is that really a sort of appreciated and dwelt upon before moving on? Because people feel, I've got to be able to play that, I've got to be able to ring a method. Important point here, bite-size, finite goals are vital in cycling. This is my point about a sort of 3-month objective. It is really easy to say to people in cycling, there's an event in 3 months' time. Let's go and do it. It's going to be 3 months, you've got to, we do some regular riding for 3 months. It's that far away. Let's go and do it. And people will commit to that. In this sort of 21st century, people are very, very happy to have a goal that is only so far ahead of them. Yeah? If you said to them, come and do something which is going to absorb your time for the next 3 to 5 years, or you have to do it regularly for 5 years, it's not so appealing. People love that short-term thing. They can see 3 months ahead. They know they've got the time for the next 3 months. Let's go for it. So I wonder what there could be in ringing, because I'm not sure that there is that perception that you can do anything meaningful in short time bursts in ringing. Allow for very limited involvement. How about getting groups of ringers to learn so they can ring in their church for Christmas or something? I'm sure people have tried things, but if your own goal is methods, maybe you don't say, look, let's get a band from this village ringing rounds at Christmas. Wouldn't that be marvellous? Enthuse them about doing that. And what an achievement that would be. It would be a huge achievement in a church where there's no ringers. Isn't it? What about using Christmas as a marketing tool? Well, that's another same point, really. But the point is, there's no further expectation. There's no, and then you can carry on, and then we'll get you to play hunting eventually. It's just ringing rounds. Let's just rounds and some very simple exercises, and maybe they could just ring for Christmas and weddings. How many people have struggled to find ringers for weddings? Wouldn't it be useful if there were people who would just say, yeah, I'll just do weddings? I know it might be a problem, it might get rusty and all that sort of thing, but maybe it's possible. So, in conclusion, I think a strong emphasis on method ringing makes learning to ring and becoming a valued ringer very challenging for many. I think if there was more value placed on foundation skills, more value placed on very simple exercises for their own sake, I know that they are done as part of teaching. More value put on accurate striking, so that, you know, if you did ring some very simple things, they'd sound lovely rather than awful. And perhaps lastly, the most important point, on the evidence of what's happened in cycling, the top end, if that's method ringing, will thrive if there is far greater numbers taking part, and if their confidence and their enthusiasm, but above all, this is an enthusiasm thing. Instead of, we don't ring methods, we're not very good, or I don't ring methods, no, I'll stay in my own tower. If instead of that, it was confidence and enthusiasm about what they're achieving, then without any pressure to achieve a high performance, then I think that there would be growth, because there would be far larger numbers and people would progress, they would want to progress. There would be people amongst those participants who would want to go on and develop and ring methods. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.